My grandson Lucas asked me to help with his school project about interviewing an elder in the family. I spent 3 hours pouring my heart out, sharing stories about overcoming poverty, building a business from nothing, and the values I hope to pass down. 2 weeks later, his teacher called me crying, saying she had never heard anything so heartbreaking in her 20 years of teaching. That's when I learned what Lucas actually submitted to his class, and why my daughter Victoria had been avoiding my calls. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Margaret Chen, and at 73 years old, I thought I had seen every shade of human nature. I had survived poverty in Taiwan, immigrated to America with 2 suitcases and $40, built a successful dry cleaning business that grew into a chain of 5 locations, buried my husband Thomas after 50 years of marriage, and raised 2 children who I believed understood the meaning of sacrifice and gratitude. I was wrong about that last part. It started on a Thursday afternoon in late September when Lucas showed up at my small apartment above my original dry cleaning shop in Queens. He was 14, gangly and awkward in that way teenage boys are, with his father's dark hair and his mother's sharp features. He had his phone in one hand and a crumpled assignment sheet in the other. "Grandma Margaret," he said, slightly out of breath from climbing the 3 flights of stairs. "I need your help with a history project. We're supposed to interview someone over 65 about their life experiences and immigration story." I had been folding laundry, my hands moving through the familiar motions even as arthritis made each movement a small negotiation with pain. The steam from the pressing machines downstairs created a humid warmth that rose through the floorboards, carrying with it the smell of starch and detergent that had been the backdrop of my entire American life. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, gesturing for him to sit at my small kitchen table. "When is it due?" "Next week," he admitted sheepishly. "Mom said I should have asked you sooner, but I kept forgetting. That should have been my first warning." Victoria, my daughter, had been increasingly distant over the past 6 months. Ever since Thomas died and left me the business, ever since the lawyer read the will and Victoria discovered that her brother David had been named executor of the estate because I trusted his judgment more than hers. Ever since she married Gregory Whitmore, a finance consultant who wore suits that cost more than I used to make in a month, and who looked at my apartment with barely concealed disdain. But I pushed those thoughts aside because Lucas was there, my grandson, asking to hear my stories. How often does the younger generation actually want to listen? "Let me make us some tea," I said, moving to the small stove. "And you can record on your phone. Ask me anything you want." For the next 3 hours, Lucas sat at that table and recorded me. He asked about growing up in Taiwan, about the poverty that defined my childhood, about my father who worked in the rice fields until his hands were permanently bent like claws. I told him about meeting Thomas at the factory where we both worked 16-hour shifts, about our courtship conducted in stolen moments during cigarette breaks, about our decision to leave everything we knew and start over in America. I described our first apartment in Flushing, so small that our mattress touched 3 walls. I told him about the years of cleaning other people's clothes, of learning English from television shows and customer interactions, of saving every spare dollar in a coffee can hidden behind the water heater. I explained how we eventually scraped together enough money to buy our first shop, how we worked 7 days a week for 15 years, how Thomas would press shirts until 2 in the morning while I handled the books at the kitchen table. Lucas listened with an intensity one hadn't seen in him before. He asked about the discrimination we faced, about the customers who refused to be served by people who looked like us, about the landlord who tried to evict us because he didn't want those kind of tenants. I told him about the loneliness of being an immigrant, about missing my mother's voice and Taiwanese food, and the sound of Mandarin being spoken naturally instead of as a broken second language. I shared stories about raising Victoria and David in this strange new country, about trying to preserve our culture while helping them assimilate, about the shame I felt when they refused to speak Chinese at home because the other kids made fun of their accents. I told him about the sacrifices we made so they could go to good schools, about how Thomas took a second job at a warehouse to pay for Victoria's piano lessons and David's hockey equipment. "Tell me about Grandpa Thomas," Lucas said softly, and I saw tears in his young eyes. So I did. I told him about Thomas's strength and gentleness, about his terrible singing voice and his careful hands, about how he never complained even when his back hurt so badly he could barely stand. I told him about the day he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, about the 6 months we had to say goodbye, about holding his hand while he slipped away in the hospital room, whispering to me in Mandarin that I had made his life worth living. By the time we finished, both of us were crying. Lucas reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you, Grandma," he said. "This is the best interview I've ever done. My teacher is going to love this." "I'm proud of you for wanting to understand your history," I told him. "Never forget where you came from, Lucas. Never forget the sacrifices that brought you here." He promised he wouldn't. He helped me clean up the teacups, gave me a hug that lingered just a moment longer than usual, and then he was gone, bounding down the stairs with the energy only teenagers possess. I felt good that day. Connected. Like maybe the distance I'd been feeling from Victoria was just in my imagination. Like maybe the family ties were still strong despite Thomas's death and the complications of his will. I had no idea that Lucas had recorded something entirely different during those 3 hours. Something that would expose secrets I didn't even know existed. The call came 2 weeks later on a Tuesday morning. I was downstairs in the shop, steam rising from the pressing machine as I worked on a pile of dress shirts. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize and I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. "Mrs. Chen?" A woman's voice said, shaky and emotional. "This is Patricia Morrison. I'm Lucas's history teacher at Roosevelt High School." "Oh yes," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand. "How did his project turn out?" There was a long pause. "Mrs. Chen, I need to speak with you about the recording Lucas submitted. Could you possibly come to the school today? I think this is a conversation we need to have in person." Something in her tone made my stomach drop. "Is Lucas in trouble?" "No," she said quickly. "No, Lucas isn't in trouble. But Mrs. Chen, I've been teaching for 20 years, and I've never heard anything quite like what was on that recording. I think you need to hear it for yourself." I closed the shop early, something I almost never did. The subway ride to Roosevelt High School in Forest Hills felt interminable. Every stop another opportunity for my anxiety to spiral. What could Lucas have recorded that would upset his teacher so badly? Had I said something inappropriate? Had my English been too broken? Had I shared something embarrassing about the family? Patricia Morrison met me in the school's main office. She was in her mid-40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the tired expression of someone who has devoted their life to teenagers. She led me to an empty classroom and closed the door behind us. "Mrs. Chen," she said gently, "I want you to know that what I'm about to play for you is disturbing. I've already reported this to the principal, and we've had conversations with Lucas and his parents." My hand started shaking. "Parents? Victoria came to the school?" "Yes, she was here this morning with her husband Gregory. She tried to convince us that Lucas had made a mistake, that he submitted the wrong file." "But Mrs. Chen," Patricia leaned forward, her eyes intense. "I teach adolescents for a living. I know when a child is telling the truth and when they're being coached. And Lucas was very clear that this was exactly what he meant to submit." She pulled out a laptop and opened an audio file. My grandson's face appeared on the screen in freeze frame, sitting at my kitchen table. But the timestamp showed it was from a different day than our interview. A day when I hadn't even been home. "I'm going to play just a portion of this," Patricia said. "But I want you to be prepared. It's going to be difficult to hear." She pressed play and Lucas's voice filled the classroom, speaking clearly into the camera on his phone. "For my oral history project," Lucas said, "I want to talk about what really happens to elderly immigrants in America. Everyone thinks these feel-good stories about hard work and the American dream, but nobody talks about what happens when those immigrants get old and their families decide they're not useful anymore." The camera shifted, and suddenly I could see my kitchen table. But I wasn't there. Instead, Victoria was sitting in my chair, and Gregory was leaning against the counter. Lucas must have left his phone recording after I'd gone out to run errands. "Mom, are you serious about this?" Lucas's voice came from off-camera, younger sounding, uncertain. "Grandma Margaret doesn't know you're planning to sell the business?" Victoria's voice was sharp, defensive. "Lucas, you don't understand business. Your grandmother is 73 years old. She can barely manage the stairs to her apartment. She has no business running 5 dry cleaning locations." "But Grandpa left them to her," Lucas said. "The will said she gets the business and the revenue from it." Gregory spoke then, his voice smooth and condescending. Your grandfather was a sentimental old man who made poor financial decisions. Those properties are worth $3 million. Your mother and I have found a buyer who's willing to pay top dollar, but we need to move quickly before your grandmother realizes what's happening. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Patricia paused the recording and handed me a glass of water. There's more, she said quietly. Much more. Would you like me to continue? I nodded, unable to speak. She pressed play again. On the recording, Victoria was talking now. Her voice cold in a way I'd never heard directed at me. She's not going to fight it, Victoria said. She doesn't understand American contract law. Gregory has been handling her financial paperwork for months. She signs whatever he puts in front of her because she trusts us. The sale documents are already drawn up. That's fraud, Lucas said, and I could hear the tears in his voice. That's literally fraud.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Grandma Margaret worked her whole life for those businesses. Don't be dramatic, Gregory said. We're not stealing from her. She'll get a small monthly payment from the proceeds. Enough to cover her rent and expenses. How much? Lucas asked. $2,000 a month, Victoria said. That's more than generous for someone her age. She doesn't need much. She'll be comfortable. The recording showed Lucas standing up, his face coming into view. His expression was devastated. Those businesses make $40,000 a month in profit, he said. You're going to sell them, take millions of dollars, and give Grandma Margaret $2,000 a month? That's not even 5% of what she earns now. It's what she needs, Victoria snapped. Lucas, you're 14 years old. You don't understand how the world works. Your grandmother came from nothing. $2,000 a month is more money than she ever dreamed of having when she was growing up in Taiwan. So because she used to be poor, it's okay to steal from her? Lucas's voice broke. She's your mother. There was a long silence on the recording. Then Gregory spoke again. Lucas, we're doing this for the family. Those businesses are going to require expensive renovations and upgrades soon. Your grandmother can't afford that. If we don't sell now, we'll lose value. This is smart financial planning. You're doing this for yourselves, Lucas said quietly. You want the money. The recording showed him reaching for his phone. I can't believe you're actually planning to do this to her. Put the phone down, Victoria said sharply. Lucas, I'm warning you. Or what? You'll steal from me too? The recording ended there. Patricia closed the laptop and looked at me with infinite compassion. Mrs. Chen, she said gently. Lucas submitted this as his oral history project, but he included a written statement explaining that he wanted to document what happens when elderly immigrants are exploited by their own families. He said his grandmother Margaret Chen is one of thousands of elderly immigrants who are being financially abused by relatives who think their hard work and savings are easy targets. I couldn't stop shaking. My own daughter. My own son-in-law. Planning to steal the business that Thomas and I had built from nothing, the business we had sacrificed 50 years to create, the business that was supposed to provide for me in my old age. Has Lucas shown this to anyone else? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He played it for his entire history class yesterday, Patricia said. All 32 students heard it. Several of their parents have already called the school. Mrs. Chen, I think you need to speak with a lawyer immediately. What your daughter and son-in-law are planning, if Lucas's recording is accurate, is elder financial abuse. It's a crime. I sat in that classroom for a long time trying to process what I'd heard. Victoria, my daughter, the little girl I used to rock to sleep while singing Taiwanese lullabies, the child I'd worked 2 jobs to provide for, the young woman whose wedding I'd paid for even though it meant delaying my own retirement, was planning to steal from me. Mrs. Morrison, I finally said. May I have a copy of that recording? She nodded and pulled out a USB drive. I've already made copies. One for you, one for our records, and I've advised the principal that if you choose to pursue legal action, the school will cooperate fully. I took the USB drive with trembling hands. Thank you, I said. And thank you for calling me. For caring enough about an old immigrant woman to get involved. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. Mrs. Chen, she said. My grandmother was an immigrant too. From Ireland. She worked as a domestic servant for 40 years, saved every penny, and bought a small house in Brooklyn. When she got Alzheimer's, my uncle tried to sell the house and keep the money. I was 16 when I found out. I testified against him in court. She squeezed my hand. Don't let them get away with this. Don't let your daughter steal your life's work. I left the school in a daze. The subway ride back to Queens was a blur. When I got back to my apartment, I sat at the same kitchen table where Lucas had recorded my interview and listened to the recording of Victoria and Gregory planning my financial destruction 3 more times. Each time I heard new details that made it worse. Victoria mentioning that I was too trusting, too traditional to question their authority. Gregory laughing about how easy it was to get me to sign documents because I couldn't read the complex English legal terminology. Victoria saying that after the sale went through, they'd help me find a nice, affordable apartment in a cheaper neighborhood. Somewhere I wouldn't need to worry about maintaining property or running a business. They were going to take everything. And they were going to convince me it was for my own good. I thought about calling David my son. But David lived in California with his wife and 3 children. He was an engineer at a tech company, busy with his own life. Thomas had made him executor of the estate because David was honest and careful, but Victoria had complained so bitterly about that decision that I wondered if reaching out to David would just create more family conflict. Then I remembered something Thomas had said to me in the hospital, just days before he died. His voice had been weak, but his grip on my hand had been strong. Margaret, he had whispered in Mandarin. I'm worried about Victoria and that man she married. I'm worried they see $signs when they look at what we built. Promise me you'll protect yourself. Promise me you won't let them take advantage of your kindness. I had promised, but I hadn't understood what he was warning me about until now. I looked at my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't thought about in almost 10 years. Jennifer Wu. We had met at a Taiwanese-American business association meeting when she was fresh out of law school and I was expanding to my 3rd location. She had helped me with some contract negotiations, and we'd stayed in touch sporadically over the years. I knew she'd gone on to specialize in elder law. My hand shook as I dialed her number. It was late afternoon, almost 6 o'clock. She probably wouldn't even answer. Jennifer Wu, the voice was crisp, professional. Jennifer, I said in Mandarin. This is Margaret Chen. I don't know if you remember me. Mrs. Chen. Her voice immediately warmed. Of course I remember you. How are you? How's Thomas? The question made my throat tight. Thomas passed away 6 months ago, I said. Oh, Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Jennifer, I need help. I think my daughter and her husband are trying to steal my business. There was a brief pause, and when she spoke again, her voice had shifted back into professional mode. Mrs. Chen, I'm going to need you to tell me everything. Don't leave out any details, no matter how small. So I did. I told her about Thomas's will, about Gregory slowly taking over my financial paperwork, about the documents I'd been signing without fully understanding them, about Lucas's recording and Patricia Morrison's warning. I told her about the planned sale, about the $2,000 monthly payment, about Victoria's cold calculation. Jennifer listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Chen, she said carefully, I'm going to ask you something and I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you signed any documents in the past 6 months that Gregory presented to you? Anything at all? Yes, I admit it. He said they were tax documents for the business. And some papers about updating Thomas's estate. He said it was routine. Do you have copies of what you signed? Some of them. Gregory took most of the originals. He said he needed to file them with the court. Mrs. Chen, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Jennifer's voice was urgent now. Do not sign anything else. Do not agree to any meetings with Victoria or Gregory without me present. Do not discuss this situation with them at all. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to file an emergency petition with the court to freeze all transactions related to your business properties. We're going to get ahead of this before they can complete any sale. Can you do that? I asked. Can you stop them? If they haven't already transferred the deeds, yes. But Mrs. Chen, I need to be honest with you. If Gregory has been manipulating you into signing transfer documents, if he's been acting as your financial advisor without proper documentation, if they've been planning to sell your assets without your informed consent, we're looking at a case of elder financial abuse. This is serious. This could result in criminal charges. My daughter could go to jail? If she's been knowingly participating in fraud against a vulnerable adult, yes. She could face significant legal consequences. I thought about Victoria as a little girl, holding my hand as we walked to the park, practicing English with me from her school books, helping me count money at the dry cleaning shop. I thought about the day she graduated from college, the first person in our family to get a university degree, how proud Thomas and I had been. I thought about her wedding, how beautiful she looked, how certain I was that we'd raised a good person. Where had I gone wrong? What had I done to create someone who could look at their elderly mother and see only a source of money? Mrs. Chen? Jennifer's voice pulled me back to the present. Are you still there? I'm here, I said. Jennifer, I want you to do whatever is necessary to protect what Thomas and I built. I don't care if it hurts Victoria's feelings. I don't care if it damages our relationship. She was willing to steal from me. She needs to face consequences for that. All right, Jennifer said. I'm going to need you to come to my office tomorrow morning at 9. Bring every document you have related to the business, the will, and anything Gregory has had you sign. Also bring Lucas's recording. That's going to be crucial evidence. Jennifer, I said quietly. Thank you. Thank you for believing me. Mrs. Chen, her voice was gentle now. I've been practicing elder law for 12 years. I've seen this scenario play out dozens of times. Adult children who think their immigrant parents are too old, too confused, too foreign to understand what's being done to them. They underestimate these elders who survived poverty, war, discrimination, and crossing oceans for a better life. They forget that surviving all that requires intelligence and strength. She paused. Your daughter made a critical mistake. She underestimated you. And she definitely underestimated your grandson. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying Lucas's recording in my mind, hearing Victoria's cold calculation, Gregory's smooth manipulation. I thought about all the times over the past 6 months when Gregory had shown up with papers for me to sign, always rushed, always insisting it was just routine business. I thought about Victoria's increasing distance, the way she'd stopped inviting me to family dinners, the way she discouraged Lucas from visiting me alone. They had been planning this for months. Maybe since the day Thomas died. At 7 in the morning my phone rang. It was Victoria. Mom, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. We need to talk. I don't have anything to say to you, I replied in English, my accent heavy but my words clear. Lucas told you, she said. That little backstabbing brat recorded a private conversation, and now he's turned you against us. He showed me what kind of person you really are, I said. He showed me that my own daughter was planning to steal from me. Steal? Victoria's laugh was sharp, ugly. Mom, you have no idea how to run those businesses in today's market. You can barely use a computer. Gregory and I were trying to help you, trying to protect you from making expensive mistakes. By taking everything Thomas and I worked for? By giving me $2,000 a month while you pocket millions? You don't need more than that. Victoria shouted. You live in a tiny apartment above a dry cleaning shop. You wear the same clothes you've had for 20 years. You eat rice and vegetables and act like you're still poor even though you're sitting on $3 million in assets. It's ridiculous. It's insulting to everyone who actually knows how to manage money. I earned that money, I said quietly. Every dollar represents hours of work, sacrifice, pain. You have no right to it. I'm your daughter, she said, and I could hear tears in her voice now. Doesn't that mean anything? Don't I deserve to benefit from what you and Dad built? You were already benefiting, I said. The will gave you and David equal shares of the inheritance after I pass. Thomas made sure you both be taken care of. But he wanted me to have security in my old age. He wanted me to have the dignity of supporting myself, of running the business we built together. You tried to take that away from me. Because you're old and you're going to mess it up. Victoria shouted. Because immigrant parents always make terrible business decisions and refuse to listen to anyone else, and then everything falls apart. We were trying to save you from yourself. There it was. The truth beneath all the manipulation and planning. Victoria was ashamed of me. Ashamed of my accent, my traditional ways, my immigrant mindset. She'd convinced herself that she knew better, that her American education and her husband's finance expertise made them superior to the woman who'd scrubbed floors so she could afford piano lessons. I'm meeting with my lawyer this morning, I said. Don't contact me again unless it's through legal channels. Your lawyer? Victoria laughed again. Mom, you can't afford a lawyer. Not a real one anyway. You'd be surprised what I can afford when someone threatens my life's work. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to put the phone down and grip the edge of the kitchen table until the trembling stopped. At 9 o'clock exactly, I walked into Jennifer Wu's law office in downtown Manhattan. She'd moved up in the world since I'd first met her. Her firm occupied an entire floor of a modern building, all glass and steel and sleek furniture. A young receptionist greeted me in Mandarin and led me to Jennifer's private office. Jennifer had changed too. She was in her late 30s now, confident and polished in a way she hadn't been as a nervous law school graduate. But when she saw me, her professional demeanor softened into genuine warmth. "Mrs. Chen," she said, coming around her desk to give me a hug. "I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so sorry you're dealing with this." She gestured for me to sit in a comfortable chair by the window. Tea appeared almost immediately, served in a proper Chinese teacup. Jennifer sat across from me with a legal pad and recorder. "I'm going to record this conversation so we have a clear record," she explained. "Is that all right with you?" I nodded, pulling out the folder of documents I'd gathered. Everything was there. Thomas's will, the business incorporation papers, tax records, and most importantly, the stack of documents Gregory had insisted I sign over the past 6 months. Jennifer reviewed each paper carefully, making notes, occasionally asking questions. When she got to the documents Gregory had prepared, her expression darkened. "Mrs. Chen," she said finally, "these papers that Gregory had you sign? They're transfer documents, power of attorney designations, quitclaim deeds. He was systematically transferring control of your assets to Victoria and himself. Can he do that?" I asked. "Is it legal?" "If you sign them voluntarily with full understanding of what they meant, technically yes. But that's the key question. Did you understand what you were signing?" "No," I admitted. He would put papers in front of me and tell me they were for taxes or routine business filings. He used complicated English legal terms. I trusted him because he's my son-in-law, because Victoria married him, because I thought he was helping me. Jennifer leaned back in her chair. Her fingers steepled under her chin as she processed what I just told her. The morning sunlight streaming through her office windows caught the edge of her teacup, creating small rainbows on the polished surface of her desk. "That's what I suspected," she said quietly. "Mrs. Chen, what Gregory did is called undue influence. When someone in a position of trust uses that relationship to manipulate a vulnerable person into signing away their assets, particularly when there's a language barrier or power imbalance involved, that's legally actionable fraud." She pulled out a fresh legal pad and began making a timeline. "Walk me through every interaction you had with Gregory regarding your finances after Thomas passed away. Every meeting, every phone call, every document he brought to you. I need dates if you can remember them." I closed my eyes, forcing myself to remember those awful months after Thomas died. The grief had been so overwhelming that everything else felt like it was happening underwater, muffled and distant. "It started maybe 2 weeks after the funeral," I said slowly. "Gregory came to my apartment. He said Victoria was worried about me, that I seemed confused about the business operations. He offered to help organize the financial records, to make sure everything was properly filed with the government." "Did Victoria come with him?" "No. She called me the night before and said Gregory would be stopping by, that I should let him help because he was a professional and understood these things better than we did." Jennifer made a note. "Go on." "He came every week after that. Sometimes twice a week. He would bring stacks of papers in his laptop. He'd sit at my kitchen table and explain that we needed to restructure the business entities for tax purposes, that there were new regulations I needed to comply with. The language he used was very technical. Corporate dissolution, asset reallocation, beneficial ownership transfers. I didn't understand most of it." "What did you do when you didn't understand?" I asked him to explain in simpler terms, but he would get impatient. He'd say things like, "Mrs. Chen, this is basic financial management," or "You just need to trust me on this, I do this for a living." After a while, I stopped asking questions because I felt stupid. Jennifer's jaw tightened. "That's exactly the manipulation tactic I was afraid of. Did he ever have you sign documents without letting you read them first?" Sometimes he would put a piece of paper in front of me and point to a line at the bottom. "Sign here," he'd say. "This needs to be filed by tomorrow or you'll face penalties." I would try to read it, but the text was so small and the legal terminology was impossible for me to parse. He'd watch me struggle and then say, "Mrs. Chen, I really don't have time to sit here all day. Do you trust me or not? And you signed because you felt pressured. I signed because he was my daughter's husband. Because Victoria had told me to cooperate with him. Because I thought family wouldn't hurt me. My voice broke on the last words. Jennifer reached across her desk and squeezed my hand. Mrs. Chen, listen to me carefully. What happened to you is not your fault. Gregory is a sophisticated financial professional who deliberately exploited your trust, your grief, and your language barriers. He knew exactly what he was doing. She pulled out her phone and made a quick call. Within minutes, 2 other lawyers from her firm joined us. She introduced them as Michael Torres, a specialist in financial fraud, and Lisa Park, who focused on elder abuse cases. For the next 3 hours they interviewed me. They asked about every document, every conversation, every interaction with Gregory and Victoria. They examined the papers I'd brought, comparing them against public records they pulled up on their computers. They created detailed timelines and asset maps, showing how my business holdings had been systematically transferred over the past 6 months. Mrs. Chen, Michael said finally, looking up from his laptop. I've been tracking the document trail. Do you know that as of last week, you technically owned exactly 0% of your 5 dry cleaning locations? The words hit me like a physical blow. What? According to the county records, all 5 properties were transferred to a limited liability company called VG Holdings LLC 3 months ago. Victoria and Gregory are listed as the sole managing members. You're not mentioned anywhere in the corporate documents. But I never agreed to that, I whispered. I never said they could take my businesses. You didn't have to agree, Lisa explained gently. Gregory had you sign power of attorney documents that gave him the legal authority to make these transfers on your behalf. He then used that authority to move your assets into a corporate entity he and Victoria control. Jennifer stood and walked to the window, her back to us. I could see the tension in her shoulders. This is worse than I thought, she said. Michael, when is the sale scheduled to close? According to the documents I found in the public filings, the sale is set to complete in 10 days. The buyers have already placed a deposit of $300,000 into escrow. 10 days, Jennifer turned back to us. We have 10 days to stop this before they complete the theft. Can we stop it? I asked. Is there time? Jennifer's expression was fierce. Mrs. Chen, I'm going to be honest with you. This is going to be ugly. We're going to have to move fast and we're going to have to hit hard. I'm going to file an emergency petition with the court this afternoon requesting an immediate freeze on all transactions related to your assets. I'm also going to request that a guardian ad litem be appointed to review the circumstances under which you signed those documents. What does that mean? It means we're going to ask a judge to determine whether you had the mental capacity and free will to consent to these transfers, or whether you were manipulated and coerced. If we can prove coercion, those documents become invalid and your assets revert back to you. And Victoria and Gregory? Lisa spoke up. If we can demonstrate that they knowingly engaged in elder financial abuse, they'll face both civil and criminal penalties. Civil penalties include returning everything they took plus damages. Criminal penalties could include jail time. The thought of my daughter in handcuffs still made my stomach turn, but there was a harder part of me now. A part that remembered Victoria's cold voice on Lucas's recording, that remembered her calling me ridiculous and insulting for living simply despite the wealth we'd accumulated. Do it, I said. File everything. I want my business back. Jennifer nodded. But Mrs. Chen, I need you to understand what's going to happen next. When we file these petitions, Victoria and Gregory are going to retaliate. They're going to try to paint you as mentally incompetent, as a confused elderly woman who doesn't understand what she signed. They're going to argue that they were acting in your best interest. Let them try, I said. I survived poverty in Taiwan. I survived immigrating to a country where I didn't speak the language. I survived building a business from nothing while people told me I would fail because of my accent and my face. I survived losing my husband after 50 years together. I can survive my daughter's lies. The 3 lawyers exchanged glances. Jennifer smiled. All right then. Let's go to war. That afternoon, Jennifer filed a 40-page emergency petition with the New York Supreme Court. The document outlined everything Gregory and Victoria had done, supported by copies of the documents I'd signed, analysis from forensic accountants showing the asset transfers, and most damning of all, a transcript of Lucas's recording. Jennifer had been strategic about including that recording. She'd had it professionally transcribed and authenticated, with timestamps and voice analysis confirming it was indeed Victoria and Gregory speaking. The transcript showed, in their own words, their intent to sell my assets, pocket the majority of the proceeds, and leave me with a pittance while convincing me it was generous. The petition also included something I hadn't expected. Jennifer had reached out to Patricia Morrison, Lucas's teacher, and gotten a sworn affidavit describing Lucas's distress, his stated intent to expose elder abuse, and the school's concern about the situation. Patricia had written passionately about Lucas's courage in documenting his family's wrongdoing, and his clear understanding that what his mother and stepfather were planning was morally and legally wrong. By 5 o'clock that evening, the court had granted a temporary restraining order freezing all transactions related to my business assets. The sale could not proceed. VG Holdings LLC could not transfer, sell, or encumber any property. Victoria and Gregory's bank accounts were frozen pending further investigation. Jennifer called me with the news. "Mrs. Chen," she said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "We got the TRO. Nothing can happen to your assets until the court hearing next week." Next week, the judge fast-tracked this because of the elder abuse allegations and the imminent sale. "We have a hearing scheduled for next Thursday at 10 in the morning. Victoria and Gregory have been served with notice. They know what we're doing now. What will happen at the hearing? We'll present our evidence. They'll present their defense. The judge will determine whether to make the asset freeze permanent and whether to void the transfers Gregory made. But Mrs. Chen, I need to prepare you for something." "What?" "Victoria is going to be there. Gregory will have lawyers. This is going to be a very public, very ugly family fight. You're going to have to testify about what they did. You're going to have to face your daughter in court and call her a thief." I thought about that for a long moment. The old Margaret, the one who had existed before Lucas's recording, would have hesitated, would have worried about family harmony and maintaining relationships. But that Margaret had been naive. That Margaret had believed that love and sacrifice were enough to ensure loyalty. The new Margaret, the one who had heard her daughter planning to steal from her while she was still mourning her husband, understood that some betrayals could not be forgiven. Some wounds were too deep to heal. "I'll be there," I told Jennifer. "And I'll tell the truth about what my daughter did." That night my phone rang constantly. Victoria called 17 times. Gregory called 8. I didn't answer. My voicemail filled up with increasingly desperate and angry messages. "Mom, you don't understand what you're doing," Victoria said in one message. "You're going to ruin everything. The buyers are threatening to sue us for breach of contract. Gregory's bank has frozen his accounts. We have bills to pay, commitments we've made. You can't do this to us." In another message, she tried a different approach. "Mom, I love you. I know you're confused right now. I know Lucas has poisoned you against us. But we're family. Family doesn't sue each other. Please call me back. Please, let's work this out." Gregory's messages were more threatening. "Mrs. Chen," he said in his smooth professional voice, "I strongly advise you to reconsider this legal action. You're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on attorney fees only to lose in court. No judge is going to believe that you didn't understand what you were signing. I have documentation of every meeting, every explanation I gave you. You're going to look foolish and confused, exactly the image you're trying to fight against." But there was one call I did answer. David, my son, called from California at 10 o'clock that night. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "Victoria just called me screaming about lawyers and frozen assets. What the hell is going on?" I told him everything. About the recording, about Gregory's manipulation, about the asset transfers, about the planned sale. David listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "Jesus Christ," he finally said. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to protect you from this. You have your own life," I said. "Your job, your family. I didn't want to burden you." "Burden me? Mom, you're not a burden. You're my mother. Victoria and that slimeball she married tried to rob you. That's not a burden to know about. That's a crisis to fix." "Jennifer Wu is handling it," I said. "She's filed all the legal papers. There's a hearing next week." "I'm coming," David said immediately. "I'm booking a flight tonight. I'll be there by tomorrow afternoon." "David, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. Mom, Dad made me executor of his estate for a reason. He trusted me to protect you and protect what you both built. I should have been paying closer attention. I should have questioned what Gregory was doing. I let you down. You didn't let me down, I said, tears streaming down my face. You've been a good son. Not good enough, he replied. But I'm going to fix that. I'm going to make sure Victoria and Gregory pay for what they tried to do. True to his word, David arrived at my apartment the next afternoon. He'd taken emergency leave from work and left his family in California, promising to return as soon as this crisis was resolved. He was 42 now, with gray threading through his hair and lines around his eyes that hadn't been there at Thomas's funeral. But when he hugged me, I felt safer than I had in months. Show me everything, he said. We spent the evening going through documents. David had inherited Thomas's meticulous attention to detail and his engineering mindset. He created spreadsheets tracking every asset transfer, every document I'd signed, every interaction with Gregory. He found discrepancies and irregularities that even Jennifer's team had missed. Mom, he said at one point, looking up from his laptop, did you know that Gregory transferred $50,000 from your business account to his personal account 3 weeks ago? No, I gasped. How is that possible? He had signatory authority on your accounts. Look, here's the transfer record. The memo line says consulting fee, but there's no consulting contract, no invoice, no documentation of services rendered. He just took $50,000. David's jaw clenched. That's embezzlement. That's straight up theft. Jennifer needs to see this immediately. He sent the information to Jennifer's office that night. By the next morning, she had amended our court filing to include the embezzlement charges. The criminal exposure Victoria and Gregory were facing had just increased dramatically. The days leading up to the hearing were surreal. I continued running my daily operations at the dry cleaning shop, but everything felt different. Customers who had known me for years asked if I was all right, noting that I seemed distracted. Some had heard rumors about legal trouble. The immigrant business community in Queens is small and gossip travels fast. Mrs. Chen came into the shop 3 days before the hearing. She was 82, a customer since my very first week in business, and one of the few people I considered a real friend. Margaret, she said in Mandarin, settling into the chair behind the counter. I heard your daughter is in trouble with the law. My daughter created trouble for herself, I replied, continuing to sort through the day's orders. I heard she tried to take your businesses. She did more than try. She succeeded for a while. But I'm fighting back now. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. Good. Too many of us old immigrants let our American children push us around. They forget we weren't always old. They forget we survived things they can't imagine. She reached into her purse and pulled out a worn photograph. This is my son Richard, she said. 10 years ago, he convinced me to put my house in his name for tax purposes. Then he sold it without telling me and kept the money. Said I didn't need that much space anyway, that he'd find me a nice apartment. Mrs. Chen, I whispered. What did you do? Nothing, she said bitterly. I was too ashamed, too afraid of what people would think if I sued my own son. So I let him get away with it. I've regretted it every day since. She looked at me intently. Don't be like me, Margaret. Don't let shame stop you from demanding justice. These children need to learn that their parents are not bank accounts to be plundered. Her words stayed with me. How many other elderly immigrants had been victimized by their own families? How many had stayed silent out of shame or fear or cultural pressure to maintain family harmony? That evening, Lucas came to visit. He looked nervous, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets as he climbed the stairs to my apartment. Grandma Margaret, he said. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cause all this trouble. I pulled him into a hug. You didn't cause anything, sweetheart. You exposed it. There's a difference. Mom is so mad at me, he said, and I could hear the tears in his voice. She says I betrayed the family, that I sided with you against her. She's barely talking to me. What do you think? I asked gently. Do you think you betrayed your family? He pulled back and looked at me with eyes older than his 14 years. I think what Mom and Gregory were doing was wrong. I think stealing from your grandma is wrong no matter what excuses you make for it. My history teacher says that being a good person means standing up against injustice, even when it's hard, even when it's your own family doing wrong things. Your teacher is very wise, I said. And so are you. Are you going to win? He asked. In court? I don't know, I admitted. But I'm going to fight. And Lucas, no matter what happens, I want you to know that what you did, recording that conversation and having the courage to submit it as your project, that took incredible bravery. You could have just done a regular interview with me. You could have ignored what you overheard. But you chose to document the truth, even knowing it would cause problems. I was scared, he confessed. I'm still scared. But Grandpa Thomas used to tell me that fear is just a feeling, not a reason to do nothing. He told you that? All the time. When I was little and scared of the dark, when I didn't want to try new things. He'd say, Lucas, being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even though you're scared. I felt tears running down my face. That sounds exactly like something Thomas would say. Lucas stayed for dinner. We made dumplings together the way I taught him when he was small. His folding technique had improved, though he still couldn't get the pleats quite right. As we worked, he told me about school, about his friends, about a girl he liked but was too nervous to talk to. Normal teenage things. For a few hours, we both pretended that the upcoming court hearing wasn't looming over us like a storm cloud. When he left, he hugged me tight. I love you, Grandma Margaret. Thank you for always being yourself. For not pretending to be something you're not. I love you too, sweetheart. And thank you for seeing me clearly enough to know I needed help. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, thinking about the next day. Jennifer had prepared me extensively. She'd explained the order of proceedings, the types of questions I'd face, the arguments Victoria's lawyers would make. They're going to try to paint you as confused and incompetent, she'd warned. They're going to point to your accent, your age, your limited English proficiency. They're going to argue that Gregory was trying to help you manage assets you couldn't handle alone. But we have the recording, I'd said. Yes, and that's our strongest piece of evidence. Victoria's own words showing intent to deceive, showing contempt for you, showing that they knew they were taking advantage of your trust. No judge can hear that recording and believe they were acting in your best interest. At 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and made tea. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Lucas had recorded my immigration story, the same table where he'd secretly documented Victoria and Gregory's betrayal. I thought about all the conversations that had happened at this table over the years. Family dinners, business planning sessions with Thomas, homework help with the children when they were young. This table had witnessed my entire American life. And now it had become the site where my family fractured beyond repair. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jennifer, sent at 2:45 in the morning. I realized she wasn't sleeping either. Mrs. Chen, the message read. I want you to know that regardless of what happens tomorrow, you've already won something important. You've shown your grandson what integrity looks like. You've taught him that family loyalty doesn't mean accepting abuse. You've demonstrated that immigrant elders deserve respect and protection. Whatever the legal outcome, that legacy matters. I texted back. Thank you, Jennifer. For everything. Her response came immediately. Get some rest. Tomorrow we show them what happens when people underestimate a survivor. At 7 a.m, David arrived at my apartment. He brought a suit for me to wear to court, something dignified and professional that Victoria had given me years ago for a business award ceremony. I'd barely worn it since. You need to look the part, David explained. Competent, dignified, someone who clearly has the capacity to run a business and make decisions. Victoria's lawyers are going to try to make you look confused. We're not going to let them. He'd also brought a folder full of documents. Business awards I'd received over the years, letters from customers praising my service, photographs of me at ribbon-cutting ceremonies for my various locations. Evidence that I was a respected businesswoman, not a confused elderly immigrant. Michael Torres met us at the courthouse. He'd been up all night too, preparing additional financial analysis. He discovered that Gregory and Victoria had already spent nearly $200,000 from my business accounts. New car purchases, luxury vacation charges, jewelry from high-end stores. They'd been treating my money like their personal ATM, while preparing to sell the assets and cut me out entirely. This is exhibit material, Michael said, showing me the credit card statements. This shows their intent. They weren't protecting your assets. They were looting them. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, wood-paneled and formal, with rows of benches for observers. Victoria and Gregory were already there with their legal team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits who looked like they charged by the minute. Victoria saw me enter and her face went pale. She started to stand, maybe to approach me, but one of her lawyers put a hand on her arm and pulled her back down. Gregory stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, refusing to look in my direction. Lucas was there too, sitting in the back row with his father. Victoria's ex-husband had brought him, wanting to support his son's choice to speak truth. Patricia Morrison, the history teacher, was also present. She'd been subpoenaed as a witness. "All rise," the bailiff called. The Honorable Judge Sarah Martinez presiding. Judge Martinez was a small woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she didn't suffer fools. She took her seat behind the bench and immediately began reviewing the case file. "This is an emergency hearing on a petition to void asset transfers and impose permanent restrictions on the defendant's access to plaintiff's business holdings," she said, looking up at both legal teams. "I've reviewed the initial filings. Counselor Wu, you may proceed with your opening statement." Jennifer stood, commanding the room with her presence. "Your Honor," she began. "This case is about the systematic financial abuse of a 73-year-old immigrant woman by her own daughter and son-in-law. Margaret Chen spent 50 years building a successful business empire. When her husband died 6 months ago, the defendants exploited her grief, her trust, and her limited English proficiency to fraudulently transfer ownership of her assets to themselves. They then planned to sell those assets for $3 million and provide Mrs. Chen with only $2,000 per month, less than 5% of the income those businesses generate." She paused, letting the numbers sink in. "We have irrefutable evidence of their intent. A recording made by Mrs. Chen's 14-year-old grandson, where the defendants explicitly discuss their plan to deceive Mrs. Chen, to take advantage of her trust, and to convince her that this theft was somehow for her own good. The recording captures the defendant Victoria Holloway stating that her mother doesn't understand American contract law, and that she signs whatever is put in front of her because she trusts family." Judge Martinez leaned forward. "I'd like to hear that recording." "Of course, Your Honor," Jennifer said. The courtroom fell silent as Lucas's recording played. Every word of Victoria and Gregory's conversation echoed through the room. I watched the judge's face as she listened. Her expression grew increasingly grave. When it ended, Judge Martinez looked directly at Victoria. "Miss Holloway," she said, "is that your voice on the recording?" Victoria's lead lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we object to the admission of this recording. It was made without my client's knowledge or consent. It violates New York's wiretapping statutes." Judge Martinez's eyes narrowed. "Counselor, New York is a one-party consent state for recordings. If the person making the recording is present during the conversation, which he clearly was since we can hear him speaking, the recording is legal." Objection overruled. "Miss Holloway, I'll ask you again. Is that your voice?" Victoria's face had gone from pale to flushed. "Yes, Your Honor. That's my voice. But the context is being misrepresented. My mother was struggling to manage her businesses. Gregory and I were trying to help her make rational decisions about her financial future. By taking ownership of her assets and planning to sell them while giving her a fraction of the proceeds?" Judge Martinez's tone was skeptical. "My mother is 73 years old," Victoria said, her voice rising. "She can barely use email. She doesn't understand modern business practices. The properties needed significant investment and updating. We were protecting her from making costly mistakes." "Mrs. Chen," Judge Martinez turned to me. "Can you stand, please?" I stood, my legs shaking slightly. "How long have you been running your dry cleaning businesses?" 52 years, Your Honor. I started with one small shop in Flushing. Over time, my husband and I expanded to 5 locations. And in those 52 years, have your businesses been profitable? Yes, Your Honor. Very profitable. We sent both our children to college with no student loans. We own our properties outright, no mortgages. We have substantial savings. Do you understand what a contract is, Mrs. Chen? Yes, Your Honor. A contract is an agreement between parties. Each side promises to do something in exchange for something else. And when your son-in-law brought you documents to sign, did you understand what those documents said? I hesitated, then told the truth. No, Your Honor. The language was very complicated. Legal terms I didn't know. Gregory said I needed to trust him, that they were routine business papers. I signed because he was family. Because my daughter married him. Because I thought family would not hurt me. My accent was heavy, my grammar imperfect, but my meaning was clear. Judge Martinez made several notes. Your Honor, Victoria's lawyer stood again. Mrs. Chen's own testimony supports our position. She admits she didn't understand the documents. She signed them anyway. That's not fraud. That's someone making an informed choice to trust a family member who was trying to help her. Jennifer shot to her feet. Your Honor, may I redirect? Proceed. Mrs. Chen, Jennifer said gently. When you signed those documents, did Gregory ever explain that you were transferring ownership of your businesses to him and Victoria? No. He said they were tax papers. Did he ever tell you he was planning to sell your businesses? No. I learned that from my grandson's recording. If Gregory had told you the truth about what those documents meant, would you have signed them? Never, I said firmly. Those businesses are my life's work. My husband and I built them from nothing. They were supposed to support me in my old age. I would never agree to give them away. Jennifer turned to the judge. Your Honor, this is textbook undue influence and fraud. The defendant exploited a language barrier, a position of trust, and Mrs. Chen's grief over her husband's death to manipulate her into signing documents she didn't understand. The recording proves they knew exactly what they were doing, and that they intended to deceive her. Judge Martinez spent the next hour reviewing financial documents while Victoria's lawyers argued that their clients had acted in good faith. They presented Gregory as a concerned son-in-law trying to modernize outdated business practices. They painted me as a stubborn old woman too proud to admit I needed help. Then Jennifer called Lucas to the witness stand. My grandson walked to the front of the courtroom with his shoulders back and his head high. He was sworn in and took his seat, looking directly at his mother as he did. Lucas, Jennifer said gently. Why did you record that conversation between your mother and stepfather? Because I heard them talking about Grandma Margaret the week before, Lucas said. They were in the living room. I was supposed to be doing homework upstairs, but I came down to get a snack. They didn't know I was there. Gregory was saying that Grandma Margaret was too old to understand what was happening, that she'd sign anything they put in front of her. Mom laughed and said it was like taking candy from a baby. Victoria made a sound like she'd been struck. Her lawyer put a warning hand on her arm. How did that make you feel? Jennifer asked. Angry, Lucas said simply. Grandma Margaret paid for my great-uncle Damien's college. She worked 2 jobs so my mom could take piano lessons. She took care of Grandpa Thomas when he was dying. And they were talking about her like she was stupid, like she didn't matter. It was wrong. So you left your phone recording the next time you visited your grandmother's apartment? Yes. I wanted proof of what they were planning. I wanted adults to know what was happening so someone could stop them. Judge Martinez looked at Victoria. Ms. Holloway, do you have anything to say in your defense? Victoria stood slowly. Her carefully styled hair had come loose. Her makeup was smudged. She looked at me across the courtroom, and for a moment I saw the little girl she used to be, scared and ashamed. Mom, she said, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. I got caught up in Gregory's plans. He convinced me you couldn't handle the businesses anymore, that we were helping you. But I knew. Deep down I knew it was wrong. I just didn't want to admit it. Gregory grabbed her arm. Victoria stopped talking. She shook him off. No. I'm done lying. Mom, you deserved better from me. You deserved a daughter who protected you instead of stealing from you. I was greedy and I was cruel, and I'm sorry. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Victoria crying. Judge Martinez made her decision quickly after that. She voided every document Gregory had manipulated me into signing. She ordered the immediate return of all my business assets to my sole ownership. She froze Victoria and Gregory's accounts pending a full audit and potential criminal charges for embezzlement and elder abuse. Furthermore, Judge Martinez said, her voice hard, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. What I've heard today suggests deliberate, premeditated financial exploitation of a vulnerable elder. Mr. Whitmore, you should expect to be contacted by law enforcement very soon. Gregory's face went gray. His lawyers immediately began whispering urgently to him about plea agreements and restitution. As for you, Miss Holloway, the judge turned to Victoria. Your son showed more integrity and moral courage than you did. He understood that family loyalty doesn't mean participating in theft. I hope you learned that lesson before it's too late. The hearing ended. David hugged me tight while Jennifer gathered her papers with a satisfied smile. Across the courtroom, Gregory was shouting at his lawyers while Victoria sat motionless, staring at her hands. Lucas pushed through the crowd and wrapped his arms around me. Did we win, Grandma? Yes, sweetheart. We won. 3 months later, I stood in my original dry cleaning shop watching the evening light paint the walls gold. The legal proceedings had concluded. Gregory had pleaded guilty to elder financial abuse and embezzlement. He received 18 months in prison and was ordered to pay full restitution plus damages. His finance career was over, his reputation destroyed. Victoria had cooperated with prosecutors, testifying against Gregory in exchange for probation and mandatory community service at an elder care facility. She'd lost her home, her lifestyle, and most of her friends. But more than that, she'd lost her relationship with her son. Lucas had chosen to live with his father full-time. He still visited me every week, helping in the shop and doing his homework at my kitchen table. We never talked about his mother unless he brought it up, which wasn't often. David had returned to California but called me every few days. He'd also taken a more active role in reviewing my business finances, though he always asked permission before making suggestions rather than demanding I follow his advice. My businesses were thriving. The publicity from the court case had brought unexpected support from the community. Other elderly immigrants had come forward with their own stories of financial abuse by family members. Jennifer Wu had started a legal clinic specifically to help elderly immigrants understand their rights and protect their assets. As for Victoria, I hadn't spoken to her since the hearing. She tried to call several times, leaving tearful voicemails apologizing and begging for another chance. But I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal. The door chimed and Mrs. Chen shuffled in with a bundle of clothes. She saw me behind the counter and smiled. "Margaret," she said in Mandarin, "I heard you won your case. I'm so proud of you." "Thank you," I replied. "I'm sorry I didn't fight for you 10 years ago when your son stole your house." She waved a dismissive hand. "Different times. Different circumstances. But Margaret, because of what you did, because you stood up in court and told the truth, my granddaughter is now studying elder law. She says she wants to help people like us. People who built something from nothing and deserve to keep it." That made me smile. Then it was worth it. After she left, I locked the shop door and climbed the stairs to my apartment. Lucas was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He was working on another history project, this one about the impact of immigration on American business development. "Grandma," he said without looking up, "can I interview you again? Properly this time?" "Of course," I said, putting water on for tea. "What do you want to know?" He looked at me then, his young face serious. "I want to know how you survived. How you kept going when everything was hard. How you built something from nothing. How you knew when to fight back." I sat across from him, the same place I'd sat 6 months ago when this all began. "Those are big questions, sweetheart. I know. But you're the best person to answer them. You're the strongest person I know." So I told him. About survival and sacrifice, about courage and betrayal, about the difference between family loyalty and enabling abuse, about learning to value yourself enough to demand justice, even when it costs you relationships you thought you couldn't live without. He recorded every word, but this time I knew exactly what would happen to that recording. This time the story being told was the one I chose to share. As I talked, I realized that Thomas had been right about so many things. He'd worried about Victoria and Gregory because he'd seen something in them I'd missed. He'd made David executor because he trusted David's integrity over Victoria's ambition. He'd told Lucas that courage means doing the right thing even when you're scared. Most importantly, he'd believed I was strong enough to survive anything. Even this. The tea kettle whistled. I poured 2 cups while Lucas typed notes on his laptop. Through the window I could see the lights of Queens spreading out below us. Millions of lives intersecting and diverging. Everyone fighting their own battles, building their own dreams. I had survived poverty and immigration, discrimination and grief, betrayal and legal battles. I had lost my husband and, in many ways, my daughter. But I still had my grandson, my son, my businesses, and my dignity. And really that was more than enough. Lucas looked up from his laptop. Grandma, do you think you'll ever forgive Mom? I don't know, I admitted. Forgiveness is complicated. But I do know this. I forgive myself for trusting people who didn't deserve it. I forgive myself for not seeing the warning signs. And I've learned that protecting yourself isn't the same as being unforgiving. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to let people hurt you anymore. He nodded slowly, processing this. Then he went back to typing while I sipped my tea and watched the city lights. Tomorrow I would open the shop again. I would press shirts and fold laundry and greet customers in my accented English. I would run my business the way Thomas and I had always run it, with pride and integrity and hard work. And I would do it knowing that my grandson had learned the most important lesson I could teach him. That doing the right thing matters more than keeping the peace. That courage isn't the absence of fear but acting despite it. That family should be the people who protect you, not the people you need protection from. Lucas closed his laptop. That's going to be the best history project ever, he announced. I smiled at him across the table, this brave young man who had risked everything to protect his grandmother. I'm sure it will be, sweetheart. I'm sure it will be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.